Good afternoon. Today's date is June 1st. Today is Saturday, June 1st, 2019. And this afternoon we have DJ Jesse De La Pena. Jesse, thank you again for being here with us and for being a part of this project. And so please, if you would, we'd like to get started. I'm sorry. Oh, here we are. My name is Skylar Hearn. I'm the archivist and one of the collaborators on this project, and I'll be interviewing Jesse De La Pena this afternoon. So, Jesse, if you would, will you please introduce yourself and then also just give us a little bit about your background as we begin? Yes, will you just please first introduce yourself?
My name is Jesse De La Pena, mainly involved in music in the city in different forms, DJ, party promoter, also work in radio, Vocalo radio. Just a music lover, been in the game quite some time, started in the probably mid-80s, so coming up on a little over 30 years in the game. Still having fun with it and enjoying it.
So Jesse, tell us what brought you into music, and then for those of us out there who don't know, what genre of music are you most interested in?
Music has always been a part of my life, probably since I was a little kid, and my mom, buying 45s and playing music around the house. When I got to probably high school is when I started getting a little more into music in general. I've always, collected records and just was always involved in music, I guess in a passive way. But I think when I got to high school, through hip hop and graffiti and breakdancing and house music culture, that kind of got me a little more involved, where I started exploring DJing and that side of it, going to parties and whatnot, and started throwing my own parties around that time. So that was probably my introduction, probably mid-'80s, early '80s more passively, but as far as being a part of it, I would say probably mid-'80s.
Okay, share with us who some of those groups were.
Probably when I was starting out buying records, it was more disco and rock and maybe some new wave and stuff like that. I think as got a little older, kind of hip hop culture and breakdancing and graffiti was the thing that probably got me to buying it a little more seriously, with the idea of possibly DJing. And that was everything from early Africa Bambaataa, Soul Sonic Force, disco. I kind of went in more of a new wave kind of alternative direction as I got probably through the mid of high school. But I was always involved, or interested, I should say, in hip hop. I mean, listening to WHBK, WKKC, WNUR here in Chicago. That was always a nice way to discover underground hip hop, because in Chicago hip hop wasn't as accessible as it is to this day now. It's pretty commercial, but the only way you could really find this music is college radio. That was probably my introduction to some more of the earlier hip hop.
Okay, cool. And then, what about house music? Like you mentioned Africa Bambaataa, and just thinking about some of those early house parties, and just some of the early parties, especially like in the 80s. I think that was around the time that people really were starting to experiment and fuse, these different music genres together. Can you talk about that, or maybe if you remember your earliest memory of going to a house music party and maybe hearing hip hop fused in, or
Yeah, I think at that time, probably around '84, it was kind of pre-house music, and it was more like electronic dance and some disco and whatnot. But that was also the emergence of early b-boy hip hop electro. So that was a lot of stuff we were hearing on the radio, on the mix shows here in Chicago. And then we started going to dances, whether in church basements or warehouses or basement parties at somebody's house. That was all kind of new to me at that point. And Chicago had their own way of doing it. Obviously, it's always been a Chicago, New York thing. But back then, I think we were still kind of coming into our own. And I was a little bit younger, so this was like, a teenager's point of view. At that time, if you were old enough, you were 21 and over, there were other parties that were going on around the city, but that was just kind of, not in my range of really going to just because of my age. But I think the majority of like teen dances and house parties and daytime parties here in Chicago was my introduction to like dance music culture. And, a lot of the electro early b-boy hip hop was fused in with the house music and the Italo and disco and new wave stuff. So the mix shows played a big part in introducing young folks or just people to the music.
Okay, and what high school did you go to?
I went to quite a few high schools, but the one I started out with was Bogan High School on the southwest side, Pulaski and 79th, and moved around. Went to Latino youth in Pilsen, Little Village area. Went to Washburn Trade for a little bit. At that point, breakdancing, graffiti, parties, that was kind of my interest. So, I had an opportunity to be creative within that, and, it kind of led to a career in music. But, back then you didn't really set out to be a DJ. DJing wasn't a career back then, so it was kind of just a hobby. And, the creative side of it, the artistic side through graffiti art, that was what I was interested in back then. I never thought it would be something that I'd still be doing as like a professional or whatnot, if you'd like to look at it that way. But yeah, it was interesting how it kind of melded into a career.
That's pretty cool. And then so I just want to go back just a little bit. You mentioned house parties and day parties that were where they were playing like electronica and hip hop and kind of like the precursor for you house music. Can you tell us about where some of those parties were and who was throwing them also?
I'm from the south, or I'm originally from the southeast side.
Okay.
South Chicago and also South Deering.
Okay.
So a little further southeast, and in the middle of 8th grade, we moved to the southwest side. So that's pretty much where I was partying, on the southwest side, whether it be Little Village or, 47th or 63rd or 26th Street. That's kind of where we found ourselves, and later we kind of ventured up to the north side, going to the Centrum and the Rainbow and places like that.
Okay, cool. And then you were saying, it's really funny though, because a lot of people do think, well, how do you become a professional DJ? And it's really great though, because, you're here and you can be a testament to, what that path is like. But when was it, if you can recall, when you felt that first spark? Like, oh, this is what I want to do. This feels good. Look at everybody around me. I don't want to just be a part of it. Like, I want to create this feeling for other people. Like,
it's interesting. When you're buying music at that time, that was just how we consumed music. So when I was buying records, I never really thought I was going to become a DJ. And I think meeting other DJs around me and friends that were DJing, then I think the idea crossed my mind. But, we just collected records we liked. It's kind of like how kids will download MP3s. It was just a different format. And eventually, you got the notion of start putting music together or trying different things and experimenting. So I would say probably, maybe the idea probably came early 80s and probably didn't start actually doing it till the mid 80s.
Okay. And then where were some of those first places that you were spinning at?
So most of the early parties were on the southwest side. My very first party that I spun at was in Little Village on 26th and Central Park at this church called the Blessed Agnes. And that's where a lot of parties got thrown back then. People throwing them, the promotion company or the dance company was Midnight Fantasy Productions. It put me on my very first flyer. And I had met Mike, one of the guys I went to school with, and I knew him and his brother were throwing parties, and they gave me a shot. But at that time, I was playing kind of a different sound. I was playing more new wave and alternative, because everybody was playing house and high energy and disco and stuff. So, I don't know, I just felt like a lot of the house music that was coming out back then was a little repetitive. Work this, bang this, rock this, jack this. So, I don't know, I think through going to parties at Medusa's up north and seeing like different sides of music. And I've always been into more the European sound. So I started playing more of that stuff out. And at the same time, I was always collecting hip hop because I was into graffiti and breakdancing. But as far as getting like noticed as a DJ, I think it was the new wave stuff, probably in the mid '80s, that kind of caught different promoters. You know, maybe they saw it as a marketing tool to bring in a different crowd or whatnot. It's kind of the same way that the promoters were looking at the punk out stuff, and it was a lot of the same music. You know, they would do a little, maybe an hour set in the middle of the party or a 2-hour set, and then they go back to what they were doing. And that's kind of how the promoters treated it on the Southwest side. You know, just trying to, I think, diversify the crowd.
So, hi there.
Hello.
I'll introduce myself later. So, when you say Southwest Side, give me some coordinates. Where'd you?
Well, I left the Southeast side. I'm originally from 87th and Manistee, close to Bowen High School.
Okay.
And then we moved southwest, 87th and Lawndale. So back then, nobody was really talking about 87th Street. Before Common was talking about 87th Street, I moved from one side, the east side, to the southwest side. So yeah, Bogan High School is where I went to high school.
Okay.
And, you know, that's kind of where I discovered, you know, club culture and house music culture and hip hop culture. That was all new to me via, you know, 1983, 1984. I was probably 8th grade going into freshman year.
Were there any clubs on the Southwest Side?
There were, but I don't think there were any teen clubs. I think that the majority of them that I knew about that we went to were just, well, they weren't necessarily clubs, they were just kind of parties that were being given,
Gotcha.
teen parties. Eventually, you know, we did, you know, warehouse parties and basement parties and stuff like that. But yeah, the majority of clubs that were probably of age, of 21 and older, there were probably maybe further southwest. I remember hearing about like different parties, and even up north, McGreevy's and Medusa's and stuff like that. But I think we were still too young at that point.
McGreevy's?
That was I forget what suburb that one was. That was like a northwest suburb.
Look, I've never heard. You're probably the first person we've interviewed. 300 people never heard of McGreevy's, so we have to learn more about that. And this whole project is about social spaces,
Yeah.
so that's important. So you said the first place you had a gig, someone put you on their first flyer.
Yeah.
Do you have that flyer?
Yeah, I do.
Do you? We'd love to.
Yeah.
You know, we're documenting, you know, house music, so certainly we would love to see that at some point and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I do have extras of a lot of the stuff that I put aside. So yeah, I can definitely provide you with some of that stuff.
That would be fantastic. So you said the promoters, who were those promoters?
Midnight Fantasy Productions.
Who were they?
Rich and Mike Huerta. They were brothers. I went to school for a short time with Mike, and I knew him and his brothers through parties. And you know, they were kind of willing to give me a shot. And I think I was playing a different sound. I was playing more new wave and alternative. And you know, the majority of folks were doing house and more of the radio stuff you were hearing on the mix shows, and some high energy. But yeah, they gave me a shot, and you know, the rest is, I don't want to say the rest is history, it sounds corny, but you know, things kind of started falling in place. Met other promoters like Radical Jess Mendoza from Co-Ed Entertainment. I mean, there is this whole side of the city, when you go through the documentaries, a lot of the stuff gets rehashed, but this whole southwest side, so like Latino side, a lot of that stuff doesn't get talked about. So I'm
That's
glad
why
to
we're
be
here.
able to share some of that story, because I mean, we're just broadening the conversation, you know.
Yes.
I think that's important, you know.
And documenting.
Yes, that's
critical.
very important.
That's
you know.
critical. So the Huerta brothers?
Huerta brothers, yeah.
Huerta brothers. Where
Yeah.
are they now?
Rich is still doing parties, probably, I'm trying to think the events he does. Mike, I think, is living more in Texas. I think he comes in from time to time. They're both friends with Mickey Mixon Oliver from the Hot Mix 5, so I see those guys from time to time. But I always got to give them a shout out because they give me my start in the you know, the teen parties. you know.
Well, we would love to talk to them.
Okay.
I mean, part of sort of understanding your story is understanding how they came
Yeah.
to be. So you wouldn't be around if it wasn't.
Yeah,
for that.
exactly.
So we would love to talk to them sometime soon.
Yeah.
Lori and I do a radio show.
Yeah,
I know you
I've
do a
caught it.
radio
I
show.
always enjoy myself. I find myself peeping in. I don't get a chance to comment too much, but I do enjoy the conversations. And every time I see that radio show, I realize how much I don't know. You know?
Us too.
Yeah. It's so interesting, these conversations, because, you know, you do the time frame. I mean, I'm 49, I'm going to be 50 this year, and I would have had to be at least 8 years older, or 10 years older, to even been at half those places, you know?
That's true.
So it is funny when I meet people younger than me and say they were there. So.
How did that happen? So we would love to talk to the Huerta brothers.
Yeah,
Bring them on the show. So
and
let's-
there's a lot of guys from that same era
Yes.
that I think.
Who are we missing? Is what?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, I did this. I can kind of even send you this documentary that I did, an audio documentary called No Chicago. It's a little series that we do on Vocalo. I haven't done it in a while, but the very first one was about early Chicago DJ crews.
Wow.
And we talked to a lot of folks, and one of the biggest crews back then was called Magic Sounds. And Magic Sounds Entertainment. Talked to those guys, and you know, Co-Ed Entertainment. There was a lot. There was a lot from the south, northwest side. Man, the Mix Masters on the southeast side. So these are all the conversations that when you see the earlier, you know, documentaries. Big up to everybody who was mentioned it, but maybe that wasn't the scene. They weren't connected. I mean, there's so many conversations that were going on, or so many things going on, even around Chicago, in Indiana, you know.
Exactly.
Up
Exactly.
in,
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, Jesse, when do you think the tipping point happened from where there was just a smack? Like, I often wonder myself, like, when did that happen where suddenly there was this proliferation of DJs? Like, remember when there was like no DJs and, you know, it was very difficult?
yeah,
You had to find, they would use the same DJs over and over, and then all of a sudden it was like,
you know, it's interesting because I think I was still kind of a pedestrian at that point. I was just going to parties, but I would collect the flyers, and when they started doing like the big Battle of the DJs at like the Aragon or at Navy Pier, at you know, the Pan American Fest. I mean, a lot of those. I mean, when I look at those flyers and I see all these names, and you know, some of them went on to be, you know, legendary. I would say like that trend, it happened pretty early, like early 80s,
I
like
think so, like
83,
83,
84,
I think
and
those
then
were
it just
years.
kind of, you know, took off from there. And another thing, another conversation you guys should have is around Pronto Printing. That's where everybody used to go, and that was the meeting place, because we would all be waiting for our flyers. And
Give us the address of Pronto Printing.
I know it was on North Avenue, closer to, there was two different locations. And I can track that down for you. But the location we used to
They had a
go
Lake
to,
Street one too, right?
there was a couple. Yeah, there was a couple. But Pronto was originally North Avenue, close to like Central Park or something like that. But we would all go there and we'd be waiting for our flights, because they always used to be like, it's going to be ready Monday night. It's like 8 o'clock. You show up, not ready. So other promoters and other DJs are there. We're all looking at the posters because they have all of them up, and we'd be, oh, that's you, you know. So I met so many different promoters and DJs, and that all turned into networking and DJing out of my neighborhood, you know, just through Pronto Printing.
Well, your thing is going to start, so.
Oh, it is?
Stop
Okay.
it, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask you to do one thing for
What's that?
me.
you gotta come on our show.
Yeah, I would love to.
That would be really fun.
I think, yeah, I mean, obviously you guys are still in the early stages, so when you get to probably, you know, maybe mid-80s, late 80s?
We
We
go back.
go way back.
Like, we just had a guy on who was like a 90s DJ.
Thank you.
I mean, there's just so much. If we try to stay in one
Is there anywhere
era,
specific?
Well, since I've given you that gold one, it has to be
Okay.
in the black.
All right. Yeah, I've been really enjoying. I've been trying to save them and come back.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put
Yeah,
them
me
all
too.
on YouTube.
No, we have them all, but
Yeah.
to listen back again, because you're always throwing these names out. Like, we need to get these other names
Well,
on.
my
show.
nephew's been like, he created a thing for me. I just gotta get him to finish it. And he's already edited like 40 of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything I can do to help,
That was
yeah.